Hi, I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, if you watched the show before, we cover a variety of topics from hurricane protection to docking. And the whole idea is to provide you with information that will help you make better decisions and have more fun in the water. Now, this show today is right up that alley. It's on marine insurance, and joining us to help guide us through the topic is Lee McNelly of MTM Insurance. Welcome, Lee.
Paul, pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. You know, this is going to be a really cool show, a lot of good information. But before we get into it, can you share a little bit about your boating background, a little bit about MTM Insurance?
Happy to do so. Been in the boating field since 1970. Started off with a little sailboat, 27-foot sailboat, and then had a 23-foot power boat. So it's been fun because it's both sides of the of the field.
Yes.
And MTM Insurance, we're an independent agency up in North Andover, servicing eastern Massachusetts and the area, providing all types of insurance, including boating insurance.
All right. Well, it sounds like you've got just the right background for this show. So why don't we get into it?
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, you know, I was thinking about the topic, and I said, wow, this is a huge topic. Lots of different facets to it. We can't cover them all, but we can cover some of the more important ones. And we've got some pictures we're going to show people along the way, kind of demonstrate what we're talking about.
Good idea.
But you know, what I was thinking might be a normal first question for someone watching the show would be, why should I bother getting marine insurance? It's complicated, it's expensive. Why should I bother? What would be the right answer for that question?
Well, the right answer is you have to have physical damage coverage on your hull and your contents, and then there's also the problem of liability insurance. So you have really two major portions of your policy and protection needed.
Right, but why not just go uninsured? Why just wait to hit that rock and then repair it after I hit it?
Well, you'd have to be self-insuring in that case, and it would be very expensive, unfortunately.
Yes. So that's one of the cruxes, right? It's my understanding is that insurance covers catastrophes as much as anything else. So people are willing to pay out a little bit every month or at certain periods in anticipation of not being able to cover the big bet if it comes in, right? The big rock or the big liability or whatever it is. So from that perspective, that makes insurance really, really important, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be using a couple things today. We're going to be using this policy. This is an actual policy. We're going to be using this declarations page. And this is where it's spelled out what the limits are about the various aspects of the policy. Now, there's actually, when I was looking at it, there's two basic points. There's physical damage and there's liability, right?
Yes.
Yep. And within that, you can actually get total and partial coverage, which will be kind of filling in the gaps for people on that as we move along, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, you know, I wanted to bring people's attention to a couple of the pictures that we do have here today as we go along. This first picture here is about, I don't know, that's about, what do you think, a 25-foot? It's like a Grady, which is sitting a little low in the water.
Not a good day.
Not the ideal situation. And here's another picture here. This is, I don't know, what do you think, maybe a 36-foot sport fish?
Yeah.
Again, a similar bad day. So this is where insurance, that's a catastrophe. So that would, I think that lines right up with our whole concept of getting insurance.
Yes, that looks like a total loss.
It looks like a total loss, that's right. Well, let's talk about this first aspect. So if we talk about physical damage to the boat and the boating equipment, based on this policy that we're reviewing today, you've got some notes there. Can you give us some of the highlights of what that physical damage part covers, and we'll get deeper into it.
Sure. I'm going to refer to some notes here because in insurance and with contracts, you really want to be specific.
Yes.
So with your physical damage, we have boating and equipment, which is covered against direct loss or accidental loss. That can be vandalism. That happens with some frequency, and or theft.
Yeah.
And all the coverages, of course, like all insurance policies, have certain limitations, and you really have to refer to the declaration page to see exactly what you've purchased.
Right. So physical, I can see the boat, but the physical also covers other things like the equipment in terms of machinery, right? The engines.
Yep, your electronics, your outboard motors. If you're a sailboat, you've got your sails, your spars, and then furniture and normal equipment. But some items that aren't included would be your dinghy or your tender, and the outboard motors with those.
And you can get coverage, but it's off on a different line in the declarations
Correct.
page, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. So all right. So physical covers the boat and the machinery, and I can have a total loss or partial loss. Let's help people understand what's total loss, because that's defined in the policy as well. Can you refresh us on what total loss means in this particular policy?
Yes, the total loss is really clearly and a complete loss of the boat. It could exceed the value of the boat to replace or repair. And it also, different policies have different terminologies.
Right.
And also, if a boat was missing, perhaps it tore off the mooring and washed out to sea,
Yeah.
if it's not recovered within a 30-day period,
Yeah.
that would also be considered a total loss.
Yep. All right. So that's bad news, total loss. I've got another picture here which we've queued up. This obviously is a total loss. Small cruiser, looks like it stayed a little too long in the season.
Yes.
And we've got another shot here. This looks like it was a really nice boat when it was above water, but it's not above water anymore. So I think we could define it as a total loss.
Very likely.
Probably, yeah. So when we talk about total loss, it's here on the declarations page.
Yes.
Under boating and equipment. This particular policy has $15,000 in terms of the limits of the coverage. What would the person get if they had this declarations page and had that boat? What exactly do they walk away with after the boat sinks like this?
Well, on that particular section of the policy, the $15,000 would be your hull coverage.
Yep.
and your engine, and it would be subject to your deductible as well.
Right.
Which in this case is $750 deductible, and it would be the agreed value of your $15,000 to possibly replace like kind, or it's just paid for.
Right. So yeah. So typically, a couple things I'm thinking about here. One is they don't typically swap out a boat. If your boat goes down, they don't come along with the boat. It looks just like it and give it to you, right?
Correct.
More apt to give you a check.
Yes.
And there's an important nuance there in terms of agreed value and market value, right?
Yes.
Can you just quickly define what the difference is for our viewers?
Well,
Typically.
your agreed value would be possibly from an appraisal or a marine survey, and they've ascertained, third party has ascertained what the value is of the boat, and then that's the value that's agreed to by you and your insurance carrier.
All right. So if I didn't have an agreed value, so this one has agreed value here, it looks like $15,000 on
Yes.
the declarations page. That's what they'd pay me in event of a total loss. But if I didn't have agreed value, I had market value, and someone said, well, the market value of that boat is $2,000 right now. That's what they would pay me, right?
That's
so
right.
Agreed value, my understanding is you have to oftentimes pay a little bit more maybe in the premium, but you get back perhaps a substantial sum more if it comes down to a settlement.
Yes.
Right.
And a lot of times your agreed value comes into play if someone has upgraded their engines, for instance.
Now, that's a good point.
And
right.
otherwise, the depreciation, they wouldn't realize it was a new engine versus an older one.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, on this declarations page, I'm just scanning it here. The dinghy and tender and the dinghy tender outboard aren't on it. That's because this policy holder doesn't have either one.
Yes.
But if they did, the coverage would be very similar to what's on the main boat, right?
It would.
In terms of the...
Yep, exactly. It would still have your valuation and determining the value of the dinghy and the engine.
Right.
The motor on the dinghy as well would be covered as well.
Yeah, so same language is preventing loss for accidental damage, what do we say, theft or vandalism.
Vandalism.
Same thing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And a lot of times it's the dinghies that disappear.
Yeah, they're a lot easier to go away,
right.
right? Unfortunately, right. And I see on this policy here, this declaration, that the boat trailer is covered for $2,500. So what would happen if I had a loss? I don't know. Again, the boat trailer went away. I would get $2,500, right?
Yes, yep. The agreed value of your $2,500 to repair or replace the trailer.
And it's the same nuances with the boat, right? There's an agreed value and or a market value, and someone that has a policy should make sure which one they want.
Yes.
So they buy the right coverage for them, right? Yeah. Well, we've got a couple other photos of some bad situations here. This poor guy, unfortunately, is sinking underway. So that can't be a good thing.
No.
No. And this one is almost completely sunk. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be one of those guys in the water there because their way home is going away.
Another bad day.
Another bad day, that's right. That's right. Well, we just talked about total loss. And often, and these pictures, unfortunately, are total loss, I think. But oftentimes there's a partial loss. And so I thought, let's go talk a little bit more about the boat and the boating equipment. Now, my understanding from looking at the policy is that they'll pay reasonable costs of repair or replacement, and repairs or replacements are made with like kind. So what does like kind mean?
It would be the similar manufacturer and grade of the repairs or of the equipment. You couldn't upgrade to a more expensive piece of equipment, which some people have tried to do. So it's really like kind and quality of what was there prior to the accident.
Okay, let's dig into this for a second because I think this is important, because this part of the policy is where the word depreciation comes into play.
Yes.
And and this covers depreciation. It covers a lot of different aspects here. My notes show out drives, stern drives, outboard motors, V drives. A lot of the infrastructure of the boat comes under this depreciation when you get into partial loss.
Right.
And so they start running a clock, anywhere from 2 to 4 years after the boat's new, against those major items and start depreciating them, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it also ties in with the hours that's on the equipment as well.
That's a good point.
Not just the age. They'll look at the hours too.
Right. So if I've got say the boat, this policy is 1970, and it hits a rock and it wipes out the stern drive and the engine, which is completely possible. And it's let's say it's going to cost you $10,000 to replace that with new stuff. That's where depreciation has to be factored in, right?
Yes.
So in Massachusetts, I think they take 5% a year. 5%. Believe that's the number.
Yeah,
up to
approximately.
10 years.
That's right.
So this boat, 1970, is long past the accumulated total, large accumulated total. So if I have to pay 10 grand, or if they have to pay 10 grand, they say, yeah, well, we started at 10 for new, but we depreciated 50%, so it's 5 grand. And then they take the deductible off that, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So my settlement, I might have incurred $10,000 worth of damage to replace everything new, but I'm actually going to get a check for around $4,250 or something like that.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the true value of an agreed value.
Yeah. So that's an important thing to know. So if someone got an engine trashed within a year or two after it's being new, they may not get a brand new engine or get the money to pay for a brand new engine. They're going to get like for like again, a depreciated thing.
That brings up a good point too about keeping good records of your maintenance.
Yes.
Maintenance, annual maintenance, so you know the hours it's on there, and you're able to prove to the insurance company how many hours were on the engine, so you get the maximum valuation on it.
Right. And this depreciation concept overarches a lot of other pieces, right? Not just the engines, but it overarches the gel coat, bottom paint, cushions, carpeting.
Yes.
Everything is being depreciated from the insurance company's point of view, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So again, that's something for someone to keep in the back of their mind, that if they want to replace it with new, which is understandable, they are not going to probably get that coverage from the insurance because there's this depreciation going on in the background.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so this could make a pretty big difference in somebody's day. So that's physical, boat and equipment. We got the dinghy, we got the trailer. That's kind of all listed on this declarations page here. Another big item, as we talked about catastrophe here and the importance of insurance being there to cover it. I could see how that would happen when you get into these other things about bodily injury and property damage. I can see you having a big issue there. And on this policy here, it says for boating liability, it covers up to $300,000. So can we talk a little bit about that? What do you have for notes there in terms of what the liability coverage are? I got bodily injury here.
Yep, exactly. That's physical harm that happens to a person or property damage to the property of others. Could be a dock, could be another boat.
Yeah.
You never know what it might be.
Yeah.
And the pays the amount for the person who owns the boat to have the repairs done, and your bodily injury could be a passenger or a family member.
Yes.
Which could be an issue besides the medical payments of an X-ray and a cast or something like that as well, which can certainly come into play.
Yeah, that's where you're getting off easy if it's just an X-ray and a cast, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, the liability is very important. Not only in your policy here, you have $300,000, but it also is important to perhaps consider an umbrella policy as well to improve your liability protection.
Okay, so this covers bodily injury and property damage, and then it covers what, basically the people in your boat?
Yes.
Right, which is your family and friends and that sort of thing. How about, it looks like it covers if you've got a non-owned boat. In other words, you rented a boat. So if you went to a camp or something, you rented a boat.
Yes.
Looks like this particular policy would cover damage and losses related to liability, even the non-owned boat, right?
And as well as borrowing a friend's boat.
Yes.
As well. And it's interesting too. This policy is a good policy. It also has the caveat of 10 feet longer or shorter in order to be using. You can't all of a sudden be using a 50-foot yacht
yes.
And thinking you're going to have the same type of coverage and protection as your own boat.
Yeah, if you come out of your 19-foot Mako and you go into the 50-footer,
that's right.
It's not really designed to adjust that much. But if you have a 20-foot Mako and you're going into a 25-footer or 15-footer, then it can accommodate that. That's a really nice thing to know. So let's say you're out there and you're using your boat, it's your boat, and you collide with someone, and the repairs for the boat are like $100,000, and the medical repairs because of the collision are about $125,000. Based on this policy, then those two numbers, that would be like $225,000 in terms of payout, and this policy should basically cover it without the liability. Without the deductible. Deductible's taken out, but the rest of that stuff would be covered, right?
Right, right. You don't have a deductible with your liability and your medical insurance.
Yeah. You mentioned umbrella policy just a second ago. I'm going to show a couple other pictures here. Again, a very bad day on the water. Not typical, fortunately.
No,
right?
no.
And we've got another picture here. That is another extremely bad. It could be a bad night there too. That's
right.
That's a bad situation. And let's talk a little bit about the umbrella policy, just a little bit more. So I've got this coverage. We've already talked about physical. We've talked about some of the liability. Do you sometimes see suits that go beyond some of these coverages, and that makes it smart for someone to get in a complementary policy?
Absolutely. We've seen suits. And it also depends on someone's net worth as well, but you could be sued for $500,000 to $1 million, and if you only have $300,000 like you have on this policy, just the hourly cost these days for a good attorney, particularly let's say a maritime attorney, is $300 to $400 an hour or more.
Yes.
So for an umbrella policy that's perhaps only $150 to $250, it's a good investment just for your defense costs and your protection.
It's short money, yeah, and it's not saying anything negative about a policy, a typical policy. It's just saying certain area, certain times, certain situations, that's a smart move.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Well, that's good to know. We've got quite a few notes here which help us along. I did want to loop around with one thing that I overlooked earlier. It was on like personal property. So people think, okay, I'm in my boat, and I'm either in the boat, or I'm getting on the boat, or getting off the boat, and something happens to my personal property. that's typically covered in a policy, or oftentimes covered, right?
Yes.
But there are exclusions to that, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's where you really have to have, like, your computer or things like that. Those should be scheduled, or check your homeowner or your condominium policy to see what you have for coverage in that case, whether it's on the boat or your automobile,
Yeah.
because it's related personal items with the boat that are covered.
Yes, because I was thinking, let's say someone had a really nice watch like a Rolex. They're going between the boat and the dock. The Rolex drops in the water. $5,000 goes down to the bottom. Unfortunately, in many cases, that's not covered, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And those don't float well.
No, they don't. So it's good to know that.
Yes. Yes.
All right. So we've got our physical, we cover liability. Let's talk a little bit about medical coverage, because I think, again, that falls into this area of catastrophic. So it's right up the alley where insurance policy would be a good thing to have for that. On my declaration page here, let's see here. It says limit is $10,000.
Yes.
$10,000 limit. Can you maybe share some of the notes from the policy in terms of what's covered here, and then we'll talk about that $10,000?
Certainly. The wording is will pay for medical expenses subject to limitations and exclusions of the policy in the declaration page. Medical expenses are reasonable, customary, and incurred by a person during a year of sustaining this bodily injury that could have happened. And it would happen on board the boat, or boarding, or leaving the boat as well.
Okay.
Which is important, and that also is an important factor of having a marine policy as well versus just having it onto a homeowner policy.
Right.
'Cause there would not have the same coverages that a marine policy has.
Oh, that's a good point. Well, an example I think about this, because there's around here there's a pretty good chop running oftentimes, and I see a lot of small bow riders out there, and I could see an instance where someone hits a big wake and the person goes flying up and comes down and they hurt their back.
Yes.
And so that's not, I don't think, uncommon. And this coverage, this medical coverage, would be the thing to kick in and cover that sort of liability, right?
Yes, that's right.
Right. Do you think 10,000 is that a pretty decent amount?
That seems to be the average that people have. But again, if someone's sued, the umbrella could pick up above that as well.
That's a good point. Let's show a couple more photos here. That's not a good situation. Fire at sea.
Yes,
That's about the wrong place to be.
that's for sure.
Yeah. And then we have actually another photo here. Similar situation, really bad place to be. And again, a place where insurance would cover a key role.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so we've covered physical, we've covered liability, we've covered medical. And let's talk about some of the other aspects of a policy that I think are important. One is the uninsured boater. We've got some notes here, perhaps you can kind of recap what they mean by uninsured boater and what sort of coverage is provided by a policy, or could be provided by a policy.
Well, it's a good point. The uninsured boater is important, and it's going to pay for damages to you being the named insured on your policy,
Yep.
or family members or passengers. In the event someone who hit you has no insurance,
Right.
and there's a lot of those out on the water, let alone on the roadway as well.
Yeah.
And it's important to have your uninsured coverage to protect you.
Yeah, you never know, and I can see that easily happening. Someone not up to speed on the benefits of insurance decides to forego it, run into somebody, they have no ability to cover the damages, so it's good to have a policy in place on your side to deal with that.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. Another aspect that I thought was interesting was this whole idea of commercial towing. Those guys are great. You're out there, you break down, you have some sort of catastrophe, and they'll come get you. However,
They don't do it for nothing.
I'm just going to mention that, yeah.
Exactly.
And they actually charge from the time they leave the dock to the time that they get to you.
Yes.
So this particular declarations page, where it shows the coverage, has $2,000 worth of coverage down the bottom there, and so that could be really helpful, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Otherwise, Again, unless you have a marine policy, you're not going to have that off of a homeowner policy.
No.
Doesn't work that way, and it'll pay for towing to the nearest port to have repairs made. Could also pay for gasoline or oil delivery and parts.
Yep.
And then emergency repair at the disabled site of where you are, and possibly a boat trailer as well to get the boat back to your home port.
Right. So I would check into that. Make sure you have insurance because again, that's a good investment. The towing bill is likely to be far higher than the amount you pay on the insurance policy to get this recovery.
It is. Yes, that's right.
We've got a couple other photos. This is a bad scene. It looks like a center console that has caught on fire in a substantial way. And this one is more of a traditional boat, but the same problem.
Exactly.
Fire at sea.
And then what frequently happens, you've got a situation like this, and you have a spillage of gasoline or oil into the water, and that triggers the issue of pollution.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because I don't think in years past pollution was such a big issue, and
it was not
so much front and center. But now it is, and this particular declaration has $939,000 worth of coverage. That's an important. If it's a checklist, that's an important thing to check on a marine policy, isn't it?
It certainly is, but particularly with the shoreline, and there's been so much protection of the birds, or in our area, the clam flats.
Yes.
And the fish out of the Gloucester area as well. So that could be a real expensive situation if it's not quickly protected and it doesn't continue to spill around the shoreline.
Yeah, so when you have an accident, whether it's sinking at the dock or sinking underway or a fire or something like that, that's where you get into that situation. They're not really talking about a small leak from the thing. It's something is punctured, an oil line or gas line or something, and then things get expensive for everyone real fast, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yep. Well, I think we've got a couple other photos here. This is a collision situation here. This is all too easy to have happen. You hear a lot about this on the lakes, the large lakes around here, particularly at night, right?
Yes. Yeah. Too many times people are out on a boat. They don't have the proper Coast Guard lighting to differentiate where they are. They think they're out for a nice moonlight cruise, and someone else may be powering along at 40 or 50 miles an hour, and they just don't see them.
Yeah, bad news. And this is just so easy to have happen. So this is something, again, another catastrophe where insurance could really help. We've got a couple other photographs to show people, and fortunately, we've got to wrap it up. And
time flies when we're having fun.
Yeah, well, at least delivering information that will be helpful to people, right?
That's right.
So we've covered a lot. Basic policy and actual policy, physical damage, medical, liability. We covered about total loss, partial loss, this thing depreciation. And as these pictures show, it can happen all too readily, these things. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up the show today?
I think just a couple of quick points. Very important to get proper education.
Yes.
Everybody on the water should have a Coast Guard auxiliary course. My son and I both took it, and it was a great refresher for me and for him as well. Also, I believe using common sense.
Yes.
Make sure perhaps you've filed a plan of where you're going with someone else. That's important, and have your safety equipment of flares and lights. If you have a breakdown, happened to a friend out in Gloucester Harbor after night with no moon.
Yeah.
That was a problem. And the last item would just be sure to check over your policy and ask your agent.
Yes.
Have him clarify what it is you have for your protection and for your boat's protection.
Good advice. And we've got to wrap up very shortly, but do you have a website address where people could connect with for answers?
MTM Insurance. My email address, if anyone's interested in getting more information, it's Lee, L-E-E-M, at MTM Insurance. And it's what I do. I enjoy helping people and providing services, and we're an independent agency, so we represent a lot of different insurance companies, depending if you have a classic boat or fishing boat or a sailboat.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for joining us today. If you have comments or questions, visit us at our website. Thank you.